Welcome to Human Potential at Work, the show where we explore social impact, inclusion, and empowerment of everyone, including persons with disabilities. Your host is Debra Rue, CEO of Rue Global Impact, and co-founder and chairwoman of Billion Strong, an identity and empowerment organization designed to bring billions of voices of persons with disabilities together. To join the global community and to donate to the cause, visit billion-strong.org. That's billion-strong.org. And now, on to the episode.
Hello, everyone. This is Debra Rue, and this is Human Potential at Work. I have my producer and friend, Doug Foresta, joining us, and he also has his own show. So welcome to the Human Potential at Work audience. I'm so grateful for you. The audience continues to grow during COVID-19, and I'm so grateful for that. So Doug, welcome back to the program.
Thank you so much, Debra. It is an absolute pleasure.
And so, Doug, tell us more about your show, too.
Oh, actually, for the purposes of this, we'll talk about 180 Podcast, which is a workforce program. So we have all kinds of workforce topics, anything related to pretty much anything from leadership to just workforce issues and things like that.
Plus, you're also a licensed
independent license. Oh my gosh. Now I can't remember what it is. LICSW, licensed independent clinical social worker in the state of Massachusetts.
Wow.
Actually,
really,
yep.
We need a bigger title than that because we definitely will 100% forget it. So
exactly. Yeah.
We're going to talk about a topic that everybody's walking right now. We are all walking uncertainty. Yeah. And it is, yesterday I was talking to Lamondre Pugh, who's the new CEO of Billion Strong, and Lamondre is a wheelchair user. And I said to Lamondre, does it ever feel like you are in mud all the way up to your shoulders in your wheelchair, and you're still supposed to go about your day-to-day, doing everything you're doing to build Billion Strong and get through the day? But it just is so intense right now. And we're supposed to just go on like everything's business as usual. Is it?
Yeah. At some level, like we have to keep things running. We have to keep the world running. We can't, I don't think it would even be good for us to just stop the world.
Right.
If we even could. But I think we have to recognize that, for example, we were told the vaccines are here. Great. You and I got vaccinated, Deborah. I know your family got vaccinated. My family got vaccinated. And we're like, okay, yay. But you and I were talking the other day. What we're seeing is just a couple of days ago on July 26th of 2021, we had 88,000 new COVID cases, and they're anticipating that's going to continue to rise into the multiple hundreds of thousands again. So is COVID over?
Doug, before you leave that, because you and I were talking about this yesterday, you had made a note to me. You were looking at the CDC numbers, and you were saying in April, we had this number. In June, we had this number. And now, I just think that might.
Yeah, sure. In April, we were at about 120,000 cases a day. That's when we were just starting to roll out, really get the vaccinations rolled out to the general public. By June, we had a couple of times where there was close to zero new cases reported on a given day. And now we're back up to 88,000. So that tells you we're still living with uncertainty. We still don't know. What we do know is that if you're vaccinated, it gives you the best chance of not getting sick if you do get COVID, or not getting severely sick if you get COVID. But what we don't know is if somebody said, what does the world look like in November of this year? I would love to see the person that has that crystal ball.
Yeah. And we probably wouldn't believe them anyway, because there's so much we don't believe. But what we do, and I actually got this idea from Heather Dowdy, who has been a guest. She was with Microsoft, but she just got a big promotion to Netflix. Congratulations.
Congrats.
And they were so smart at Netflix to get this talented woman with lived experiences as a Black American, as an engineer, and both of her parents are deaf. So she's talented. So good for Netflix. But I was talking to her about all the stuff and the uncertainty, and it's just so intense trying to continue to move on. But what she did was, we had a meeting one time with her because she was being really gracious and supporting us with thinking about Billion Strong. And she said, before we start, can we just do a little check-in with each other? And so we went around and we were just honest about what we were walking. And I just thought it was such a really beautiful experience. Ever since then, every time we have a staff meeting once a week, we do a check-in. And by the way, Doug, in a way, we don't have time to do a check-in because
Right.
doing the check-in with the team, it takes a while. But I believe we have to do these check-ins. And so we had a meeting yesterday, our staff meeting yesterday, and we have we're a small team, but we have employees all over the world. So we had people from the States, different parts of the States. We had David, who's in Costa Rica, who's our CFO. We had our CIO, Nabil, who's in Syria. We have Jasmine, who's engaged in Billion Strong, and she's in the Philippines. And we've got Ricarda, and she's in Germany. We're very diverse culturally all over the world. It was so hard to listen to this because everybody is lost somebody, one of their close friends or their relatives is sick. David was saying in Costa Rica, they're having terrible flooding, they're having earthquakes, and their bridges are falling down. Oh, yeah. Gosh. Oh, wow. So far at the time, there had been no casualties reported. But then Ricardo said in Germany, they're having flooding and they've lost 150 people. Yeah. And then you go to Syria. Things have been bad in Syria a really long time and they're worse. And during the pandemic, who gets hurt the worst? But people with disabilities and other disenfranchised communities. And then you go over to the Philippines and they're flooding. They're having earthquakes, and yay, a volcano that was inactive has become active. And sure. On top of it, they're dealing with the COVID-19 Delta, and it is so bad that they're saying that they're going to shut down all the business, shut down. One family member will get letters or something that allows them to go out and get food for the family, but you have to stay off the streets.
Wow.
So it's terrifying. And I was talking to Annie with Accenture, and she was talking about what was happening in India. It's terrible. She said, actually, and I'm just repeating what she said. She said that in India, because of the pollution and the poverty and things like that, the regular COVID-19, it didn't hit them as hard. But the Delta is it's just killing people left and right in India. It's horrible.
Yeah.
And she said she believed, and a lot of researchers believe, one reason why they didn't hit as hard by the regular COVID was because of their immune systems dealing with the pollution and stuff like that. But the Delta hurt them so bad. And one more comment, Doug. I know that we were told we didn't have to wear masks anymore if you were vaccinated.
Right.
But I just feel, I don't go out that much, but I just feel uneasy being around people with not masks on. But I've been doing it. But now the Delta is increasing. The numbers are increasing. And I believe I'm going to wear a mask from now on. So is my family, even though I'm fully vaccinated. And we expect the governor of Virginia, Governor Northam, to bring the masks back, mandatory masks.
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately, we're seeing that like in LA, they've brought back the mask mandate. The problem is that even if you're vaccinated, at some point, if there's enough people getting COVID around you, it can eat through your protection of the vaccination. It's like the way they said it's like wearing a raincoat. If it's raining a little and if it's raining a little, your raincoat will keep you fine. But if you're in a monsoon, your raincoat, sooner or later, it's going to get through. One thing you said that I think is good for leaders, and we're thinking about the idea of human potential at work, is about, you said we don't have time to check in, but we do it anyway. And I think that's going to be so important to recognize that, yes, we are reopening. Things are reopening. But it doesn't mean just because we're reopening that everything is okay and that we're just going to go about business as usual. We have to recognize that there's been a toll on everyone. And because life is so clearly uncertain now, I would argue life is always uncertain, but we had stories that it was more certain.
We thought we were in more control than we are.
Right. We thought we were.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That puts an extra stress and an extra strain on us. And it goes to the piece about mental health in terms of, I think businesses that used to say, too bad, get the job done, not our problem. I remember when I started in the workplace, if I was ever to say, I have anxiety or, that would not have gone over well. Debra, they would have
noted in your file and they would always remember it.
That's right. It
would be used against you.
It would be used against you.
That's what I believe.
And so you wouldn't be vulnerable. You wouldn't share. And of
You're
course,
both
what happens when you're an employee and you're trying to hide your anxiety and your trauma?
right.
Do you
Oh, I
become
know.
more productive?
And everybody is so traumatized right now. I know that haven't heard anything lately, and I will tell you why. Because I am not listening to the news. I am not listening to the media. Now, I'm all over social media. How can you avoid it? I do. I just go in there and
Yeah.
I focus on what I'm talking about, disability
Yeah.
inclusion. Let's make the world a better place. I mentally
Right.
cannot handle the news. I
Right.
can't. And I know the news is designed to freak me out. And there's some really scary things happening in the world, but
Yeah.
I can't do it. And it's interesting, Doug, because I know so many of my friends and colleagues that are doing the same thing. I've never met so many people that are doing the same thing. They just are not listening because they're trying to stay sane. But also, Doug, I heard when we first moved into the pandemic, shutting down and stuff in March 2020 in the States, I heard that after it was done, 65% of Americans were going to have PTSD. And I do believe it's probably very high. And PTSD is so interesting because you might not even know you have PTSD for years, but we are definitely walking trauma.
Yeah. And I'll just say, like, trauma. So there are specific criteria in the DSM, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Psychiatric Disorders, right? There are certain, it's like the Chinese menu of things that you have to have in order to qualify for PTSD as a diagnosis. However, I often think of it like there's capital T trauma and then there's lower T trauma. And so capital T trauma are things that people would understand. You have a loved one die, you go to war, you have some type of abuse in your life, things that people go, okay, living through COVID, living through just the idea that we live in a society that could be impacted by a pandemic in this way, which we never thought in America that we would be susceptible to. I know I didn't. I remember watching the news and being like, oh, that's going on in Wuhan, China. But come on, that's not going to hit Western Massachusetts. Come on, that's far away. Just that alone, just that piercing of this bubble of what we thought was possible, it creates at least that lower T trauma, meaning you don't have to have full-blown PTSD to experience trauma symptoms. And I can tell you where we're seeing this. For example, in the airlines, I know you're not watching the news, but you may have heard that there's been a tremendous increase in incidents of aggression in the air against staff and so forth. And I believe that when you think about one of the symptoms of trauma is irritability. And, you put people who are already, they haven't traveled in a while, right? They probably have some level of anxiety. Now they're having a drink. You're serving them a drink and they're getting irritable and they're acting out physically in violence. And we're seing that.
And we're seeing it also in the way people drive, the way they interact with each other.
Yes.
Doors.
Yes.
It is nerve-wracking to drive. I'm in Virginia and I drove with my husband to North Carolina to meet my sister at the border. Yeah. And I was shocked at the aggressive driving, not just fast driving, but people, you can just tell that people are really freaked out and not being patient with each other. Oh, it's just so sad.
Right.
And it's just this ongoing. And now what's happening, Doug, now? And then there's us and them. Oh, you didn't get vaccinated. And you were telling me something that, because I haven't been listening to the news, I hadn't thought about when you were talking about how if no judgment on whether, can't be the vaccine police. Everybody has to decide what they want to do for themselves. Right. But I did not realize that if you haven't been vaccinated, that you actually can contribute to and maybe I'm saying that wrong, but the variants.
No, it's absolutely true. Now, I also know people, I just want to say this because we're thinking about people with disabilities. For example, one of my wife's aunts she had cancer. And they had to, as part of that, they had to remove her lymph nodes. And she has a very weak immune system. And her doctors have said to her, the vaccine could kill you. Okay. Like getting COVID could kill you.
Please don't do it.
Don't do it. We actually recommend that you just take precautions and don't get any of the vaccines. So when we have to think about people that are immunocompromised that may not be able to take the vaccine. But for people who are just choosing not to take the vaccine for whatever reason, there is no question. And also young people like my daughters who can't get the vaccine yet. This is where the virus is mutating. And this is life, right? Life, remember Jurassic Park?
Yes, life
Jeff
will
Goldblum,
find a way.
life finds a way. And viruses really have only one thing that they want to do. They want to replicate and survive. And that's what they're doing. It's okay. You have a vaccine. Great. Here you go. We'll become more effective. But it has to live somewhere. And so it's the people that are not vaccinated that seem to be where the variants grow inside their bodies, and they've been able to document this to actually see how this happens.
Yeah, that part's fascinating, and it's once again people fighting with each other, and you're so all of that stuff. And the other day, just a couple of days ago, Sarah and I went and had our hair done, which is these days such a gigantic treat. Things that that you took for granted before. And afterwards, I took her to a Mexican restaurant because every time we go out to eat, we have to go to Mexican because it's her favorite food in the whole world.
Oh, I love it.
So we always go to Mexican, but that's okay. So we went to this cute little Mexican place, and we weren't wearing masks because we're both vaccinated. And I just happened to notice in the restaurant, nobody was wearing masks except the wait staff.
Right.
And except this one table where they were wearing masks. And the woman just coincidentally happened to have on a birthday crown. So it was her birthday. And I remember looking at them and just in my mind think, I was just curious because I'm such a curious person. And just for a second, I thought, I wonder why are you being extra cautious? Maybe they are actually listening to the news because I now will not go out in public without a mask anymore. But I didn't feel judgment towards them. I was I was curious a little bit. But that is, of course, not what people are doing. People are actually getting aggressive with each other and you're bad. And
right.
And I don't think that's going to help any of us because we are all so freaked out.
Right.
And I just think we have to be kinder to each other because it is so hard right now.
Yeah. And we're going to have to deal with this at work, talk about uncertainty again. As people return to the workplace, people have different beliefs and different comfort levels. They also have different health. The other piece is, as a company, you have to think about people's physical and mental health, and you're returning people to the workplace. You may not know everything that's happening with me, or maybe it's not me. Maybe I'm fully fine, but what if I'm a caregiver?
Like me, I have two people I'm caring for in my home.
Exactly. Or we've got a 4 and a 3-year-old. So I'm not that worried. If it was just me and my wife and my 16-year-old son, we're all vaccinated, but my daughters are not. And exactly, you have people who are, so we don't know what people bring. And then we also don't know what shape people are in emotionally.
Right. Because people are really in trouble. And I know we've always had uncertainty in the world. Yeah. It just feels a little bit, and maybe because we're walking it, but I know in my lifetime, I've never seen anything like this. And I know we've had some bad times.
But we didn't live through them.
We didn't live through them. Good point. We didn't live through them, and we didn't. Yeah, it's and you want, especially those of us that are real empathetic, we want to help, and we don't. But the reason why I'm staying away from the news once again is I'm struggling with my mental health, and I've disclosed I chose to go on a prescription to help me manage it because I just was crying all the time. Yeah. And it's so we all have to appreciate what we individually are walking and what we're collectively walking. And we have to try to be a little bit kinder to each other. And I was talking to a friend of mine who has a friend that just got COVID, and the friend is a woman. She's probably in her late 30s. I mean, she's an African-American woman. And he said she got COVID. And I said, is she okay? Did she get the vaccine? Just asking questions to understand. And he said she chose not to get the vaccine because she just was so confused by all the misinformation. And she thought, I'll just protect myself. I'll be careful. And so she wasn't trying to hurt anyone else. And also I have other friends that are trying to get pregnant, or they are pregnant, and they're like, I don't want to do it. I'm not going to get the vaccine. And they should be allowed to make those decisions. Sure. But us turning on each other and attacking each other, that is not helping. That's not helping anybody. It's making it more scary.
And the other piece, though, as you're saying that I'm thinking about is I want to make sure that we also mention the upside of uncertainty. And we are risk-averse creatures in general. We are the descendants. I often think about this, like we are the descendants of risk-averse people. And it's pretty, here's an example of why. Think about your great grandparent who was walking the fields in Africa, and they saw some rustling up ahead. And one person said, "Hey, I think it might be our friends. I'm going to go check out what it is." And our ancestors said, "Oh no, that's going to be something terrible. And I'm going to run away from it and hide behind this rock until everyone." And what ended up happening most of the time, it wasn't something friendly, because when you're generally, there's not a lot of friendly things. But then we created civilization, we created societies, we made police departments and fire departments, and we made the world safer for ourselves. But we still have that mindset of stay safe. And one of the things that causes, and I know, Debra, you have definitely seen this for sure in your work. How many times have you heard from people, "Oh, yeah, we'd love to make our website accessible, but we don't want to mess with it right now." Or you were talking about an app. "We'll build the app and then later we'll do it. We just don't want to take any chances. But we have to do things the way we've always done it."
Yeah, we're going to create it for the majority of society.
Right.
Yeah, I just recently had this conversation, and I said, that's what we hear all the time in our community. We're going to make it accessible later. And I said to him, and I don't know him very well, and so I was trying to be kind, and I didn't want it to appear that I was threatening him. So what I said was, we see big corporations that choose to do that, and then the lawyers step in and they help convince them that, no, you actually do have to include us. I said, so it's just a little discouraging for our community because we are always left out because it's too much trouble to make things accessible.
And it's the way this is the way we've always done it. And so one of the things uncertainty can do is shake everything up so that if there really isn't, no one can really say what is safe right now. No one can really tell you, literally no one can tell you, right? Should you wear a mask? Should you not wear a mask? Are you safe with the vaccine? Are you not safe? Will there be another variant? So if it turns out that we don't exactly know, then shouldn't we use this time to take a risk for good, take a risk for social good?
Ooh, I agree. I really agree. And to me, that's what we do. Like right now, we are exploring identity like never before. And I give a lot of credit to our LGBTQI A plus community.
Yeah.
And I have here in the window, she, her, hers. I also want to remember to do this. This is something I want to remember. Even though I've already started, I want to give a visual description. So I want to say I'm a white woman with gray hair and purple streaks in it. And I'm wearing a purple blouse and a purple pendant that I don't know what kind of stone it is. But I think being more deliberate about inclusion is important. And I identify she, her, hers, but I do it to support that community that is digging into what it means to be human. And I want to be very conscious about always giving a visual description. And I was seeing people do it. I was hearing people do it on Zoom. And I thought, do I want to do it? Is that helpful? So if you want to know something, ask somebody that might be helped by it. So I went to Jasmine, who works with us in the Philippines, who is blind. And I said, Jasmine, what do you think about that when people do that? Do you think it's like, oh, whatever? She said, when people take the time to describe themselves, it makes me feel more included. It makes me feel like I'm part of it. And she said, I actually go out when people do that and I follow them no matter what they said. I follow them because I appreciate that they took an extra couple minutes. It's not even that, maybe a minute to include me. And I want to be inclusive. And so I'm going to try to be more deliberate about it. I forgot this time. Doug, do you want to give a visual description of you? Handsome.
Sure. I am a bald man with black glasses.
No, I'm going to give you a description. You're doing terrible. He's a handsome young man. He doesn't have any hair, but a lot of us women don't care. With glasses on and a red shirt. But it's also interesting how people choose to describe themselves.
Sure.
It's just interesting. What are you? Because in a way, you can decide a little bit maybe about who they are based on what they describe. So,
sure. Absolutely.
But at the same time, it's being thoughtful. It's being thoughtful for each other. Yeah. And I think that's just a small thing, but it's a thoughtful thing.
That is really a gold nugget out of this conversation is in a time of uncertainty, it's more than ever important to be thoughtful.
Yes. And be kind. I know we have lots of signs that say, be kind. Sarah, my daughter with Down syndrome, has painted a bunch of them. Be kind, be kind, be kind. Do little tiny things that can really make somebody's day. And it's silly. I mentioned this before. A couple of weeks ago, I was driving through McDonald's and I don't know, just on a lark, I said to the woman, I'd like to pay for the customer behind me. And she said, oh, thank you. She said, it's a little thing. And this customer had only gotten like $1.38 worth of stuff. So I wasn't buying the entire family and all their relatives, but it was just a small thing. But I think right now we really have to be more deliberate about the small kindness, the small thoughtfulness, because people are just, and you know what, Doug, it's also interesting to think about how we clinically diagnose trauma as opposed to how we individually decide whether or not we're traumatized.
That's what I mean. You don't have to actually have formally diagnosed PTSD to experience trauma. You can, like I said, even these little traumas, like we don't realize it, but for example, just being isolated is a trauma. It is a form of trauma. And if you don't believe that it is, then let me ask you, what do we do with the worst people in our society? What's the worst punishment that you can experience if you're in a prison system other than death? It's isolation, segregation. We use that, being isolated, having your routine disrupted. You know, I have a 4-year-old and a 3-year-old.
How's sleeping going for you?
What is that? Yeah, when they get their routine disrupted, you can see how they act. But adults, we are like that too. We are also, I think we've all experienced that. Look at how people are running out to go on vacation and pay any amount of money, right? Because we want to get back to having a summer. Most people didn't have a summer last year.
Right. And no holidays, no vacation. I know and you had mentioned before we went on air that your wife had commented on the hotel prices.
Yeah. It's we were looking at actually a friend of mine came up to stay for a night, and I was kind of at first I was like, oh come on, you can't rent the hotel. But when I looked at the prices, it was like $500 a night, which I got to tell you, Western Mass it's beautiful here, but it's not worth $500 a night.
Yeah, that's what we pay in New York City and
it's
LA.
Normally like $80 to $99.
That's what
hotel prices right now are 4 or 5 times what they are because it's a COVID tax. They're trying to make back the money. They've lost a lot of money, and people will pay a lot of money because they want to have a summer.
Doug, what would you recommend? We've talked about some of the things we are personally doing, trying to help ourselves, our family, our loved ones, our employees deal with this, but any other recommendations for people? Because I think people are really freaked out. I know I am. I'm trying not to be. I'm trying to be all calm, but I'm freaked out.
Well, I think that one thing to recognize is that we don't ever actually know what life is going to bring. Our sense of certainty, in a way, is an illusion, and that we can embrace. I think coming back to the present moment, things that we've been talking about for years, Debra, honestly, still just become more important than ever. Embracing this moment is the only moment that we ever know, and then using what are we going to do with our anxiety? We can't. 50 years ago, this is probably going to be reversed, but Rollo May, about 50 years ago, wrote a book called The Meaning of Anxiety. And he talked about this idea that anxiety isn't a bad thing. It's what we do with it. To be alive is to have some level of anxiety. We say if you want to meet people with no anxiety, go to any graveyard. You'll see a lot of people with no anxiety. But for those of us that are still vertical, we're going to have anxiety. And what do you do with it? And I think about you, Debra, and out of all of this last year and over this past year, you created Billion Strong, right? You found a meaning in all of this, and you're creating a global community. You're doing something. So I think that's a big piece of it is what are you going, yes, you've had this trauma, but what are you going to make of it? What are you going to create?
How are you going to make the world a better place? I think we've got to be light bringers. We've got to be showing the light forward, because even though we're scared, we have to be light bringers. And I also want to say with Billion Strong, if you haven't joined our free movement, it's billion-strong.org. But Doug is going to be one of the content providers. He's going to create some classes for us. He's going to mind and body balance. And so he's going to really contribute a lot of content to support our community. The 1.3 billion of us, and by the way, there's a whole lot more people than 1.3 billion people with disabilities in the world, but with our allies, our loved ones, I think we are definitely billions strong, but it is exciting. So please join that movement, www.billion-strong.org. And I know we're out of time, but Doug, before we leave, will you just tell the audience how they can find out more about Workforce 180?
Sure, yeah. So go to workforce180.com. And if you click on podcasts there too, you'll see Debra's podcast and many of the other podcasts that we produce, and including also the 180 podcast, which is a workforce podcast. Thank you,
Right.
Debra.
And y'all will help people that want to start out their podcast and manage their podcast. I found, even though I know you've been my producer for, going on 7 years with my show podcast, but I found it just so helpful to get support because there's so many moving parts when you do shows like this that I find it very helpful that I have somebody that understands. It's just amazing what can go wrong. Like we had another guest today and the guest didn't show up because I think, anyway, the person that was helping them show up got let go. Anyway, things happen. But I find it very valuable to be able to focus on who is the guest, what are the topics, get them here, and then you handle all the hard stuff in the background, including we're really proud to now do this show on LinkedIn Live as a creator on LinkedIn, which we feel so blessed doing. So there's a lot of moving parts, but it has to be accessible for everybody too, which you also have been very supportive of, making sure everybody can, partake of this content. So I appreciate that, Doug. So thank you.
Thank you, Debra. Thank you so much.
And let me give you the final words if you want to, say anything else.
Oh, sure. I guess the last thing I would say is that if you think about it, all that we're experiencing, all these modern things still come back to, I think every Eastern philosophy really comes back to this idea what the Ram Dass said, be here now. If we can be here now, then we can do amazing things.
Yeah. Stay in the moment. Be safe. Be kind. Let's help each other because we're all going through this together and it's not over. It's not over. It's not over. And that's okay. We'll focus on making the world a better place. So that's the opportunity. I agree with you. Let's focus on making the world a better place for everybody and not leaving people out. Anyway, thank you to the audience. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you, Doug. And thank you to Workforce 180 as well for supporting what we do with this podcast and this show too. So bye, everyone.
You've been listening to Human Potential at Work. To learn more about Rue Global Impact, visit rueglobal.com. And to learn more about Billion Strong, an identity and empowerment organization designed to bring the billions of voices of persons with disabilities together, you can join the global community and donate at billion-strong.org. That's billion-strong.org.